Let's have a look at the important civil aviation organizations. Since we are studying the subject of air transportation, it is very important to know what kind of organizations are involved in various aspects of global air transportation. So, the organizations can be classified under three broad categories. International and national are the two main divisions, right. So, the US federal agency is one block under which you have many organizations, and then you have the US state agency, then you have international government agencies, and you have the industry and trade organizations. Under the US federal agency, we have the DOT or Department of Transportation, then TSA, Transport System Administration, and the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and the NTSB. About all of these we will have a look very briefly. Under the US state agency comes one of the organizations is NASAO, NASAO. Under the international government agency, we will have a look at International Civil Aviation Organization or ICAO, and under the industry and trade organizations, we will look at IATA, International Air Transport Association. But there are also a few other organizations about whom we will touch upon very briefly. Let us start with the US federal agencies, because they were the first to be created to regulate and expedite civil air transportation in the US and then slowly globally. The Department of Transportation is the first and the major organization about which we need to know. This was founded way back on 1st April 1967, and it coordinates 13 other agencies which look at various aspects of transportation, not just air transportation, but road, ship, rail, all kind of transportation. The secretary of this agency is a cabinet member, and he is the personal assistant to the President of the United States. The Federal Aviation Administration is the major administration legal body under the US. It has several roles. One of them is to establish the landing charges or the charges that will be levied by the airports for landing and operating at airports in the US. It also controls the air traffic. So, FAA has a major responsibility of managing and controlling air traffic in the US. It issues operating certificates to carriers, that is permissions for them to operate. It also provides aircraft regulations, and from time to time the regulations are amended and updated, and also it is also an enforcing agency or enforcement of regulations for safety. These are the broad aims or duties of the Federal Aviation Administration. Although the jurisdiction of FAA is mainly in the US, but several agencies all over the world also adopt FAA regulations as applicable to their own countries, and hence FAA has a truly international reach. The headquarters is in Washington DC, but there are all these different sub locations of the offices. The next important body about which we should be aware is the Transportation Security Administration or TSA. This was created very recently as a response to the 9/11 incidents, in which for the first time aircraft were hijacked and used as bombs by the terrorists. The focus of TSA is civil aviation safety, and many regulations, many procedures are brought about by TSA to ensure safety. In fact, at all US airports you will find personnel from TSA to man the booths that scan the passengers and the baggages before they board the flight. Then we have the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, which was set up in December 1970. This body, as the name suggests, is there to ensure that the environment is protected. Okay. Then we look at NTSB. Now, there is some history behind NTSB. Initially, there was an Air Commerce Act in 1926, as a result of which the Civil Aviation Board, or CAB, was formed. We have discussed about CAB, its history, its activities, its limitations in the previous talk about the Airline Deregulation Act. So, if you have not seen that video, kindly go back to the playlist and look at the video on the Airline Deregulation Act first before proceeding further, because you will get a lot of information regarding CAB there. Now, the CAB could not manage, and therefore, an agency called as the FAA was created, but in 1967 a separate agency called as the National Transportation Security Board, or NTSB, was created, and this was separated from FAA, but still comes under the Department of Air Transport, Department of Transportation. Now, what is the role of NTSB? Basically, to investigate the accidents that take place and to bring out recommendations, reports, and steps to be taken to avoid their recurrence, and all activities related to the transportation safety. That is the mandate of NTSB. Now, let us have a look at US state agencies. The most interesting one of that is called as the National Association of State Aviation Officials, abbreviated as NASAO, NASAO. This is the organization, the only organization that deeply invested in representing the public interest of all facets of aviation and airports. Okay. So, there are various tasks. It does advocacy, it shares the news, it talks about education and training. I would be happy if you can go and have a look at the website of NASAO to get more information on its activities. Let us move on to some international government agencies. The first and the most important one is the International Civil Aviation Organization, abbreviated as ICAO and called as ICAO. ICAO is, so what is ICAO? Basically, ICAO is an organization where the members are the sovereign states of the world, and there are two subdivisions. There is a ICAO Secretariat, which is based in Montreal, and the Secretary General sits there, and then there is ICAO Council, which has 36 member states, but then there is an ICAO Assembly, which has got 189 member states. Each sovereign country is represented in ICAO, and India has been a part of ICAO right from its conception. The headquarters of ICAO are in Montreal in Canada, and it has got several regional offices. The nearest from India is in Bangkok. You also have them in Cairo, Nairobi, Dakar, Paris, Mexico, and Lima. What is the role of ICAO? It was set up under the Chicago Convention of 1944, under Annex 7 of that convention. The main aim of ICAO is standardization and safe and orderly growth of global air transport. Because air transport, by virtue of its nature, is something that has got global connotation. Therefore, the rules and regulations and procedures which are applicable in air transportation should be globally acceptable and similar. The ICAO issues guidelines and constraints on the aircraft emission standards. These emission standards are in terms of hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, various oxides of nitrogen for engines, and S and PM for the, that is particulate matter, and soot for the local air quality near the airports. It also gives us aircraft noise regulations, so that the communities who operate or live near the airports do not get too much inconvenience by the operation of the aircraft. Recently, there was a CORSIA agreement in 2016 where the whole body of ICAO decided to cut down the global aviation emissions by about 50% till 2050. This reduction is with respect to the emissions in 2005. So, this is a very bold initiative of ICAO to curb the aviation emissions. Currently, it is estimated that the total contribution of the civil aviation towards the pollution and emissions worldwide is about 2%, but it takes place at a location which can directly affect the ozone layer, and therefore, and also at ground where people live. So, it is very important for the aviation community to be sensitive towards reduction in aviation emissions, and the CORSIA goal is to cut it down by 50%, as I mentioned. ICAO also carries out investigation of air disasters and brings out recommendations and guidelines to ensure that they are not repeated in the future. And recently, because of the tremendous growth of the drone industry, ICAO has come up with the drone regulations and the procedure for drone classification and their registrations. Let us have a look at some of the steps taken by ICAO to ensure standardization in the aviation industry globally. In air navigation, the ICAO issues the national AIPs, which are aeronautical information publications. These are updated on a monthly basis so that people who operate from one country to the other remain current about changes or modifications. Then you have Aeronautical Message Handling System or AMHS, which allows non-communication or non-verbal communication automatically. Then ICAO has classified the airports or aerodromes under various categories. There are reference codes, there is a number and there is a letter. The number 1 to 4 depends upon the field length required by the aircraft to operate, and the letter A to H is a function of the wingspan and the outer main landing gear span. So, you can appreciate that the number is a surrogate for the length or the distance required by the aircraft to safely operate, and that comes primarily from the approach speed and from the weights. And the letter A to H are mostly to help with the effect of the geometry of the aircraft, the wingspan and the outermost main landing gear span, which affects the runway to runway, runway to taxiway, taxiway to taxiway distances, and also the corner radii of various airport layouts. ICAO has specified the system of units as standardized. So, under ICAO regulation, the cruise speed is always mentioned in kilometers per hour, the landing speed is always mentioned in meter per second, distance is in kilometers, and the elevation of the aircraft or at the airport is from the mean sea level in meters. So, these units are standardized by ICAO. FAA still uses the FPS system, but ICAO has gone into this particular system. ICAO also gives a 4-letter code to every airport and a 3-letter code to every airline. For example, VABB stands for the Mumbai Chhatrapati Shivaji International Airport, and AIC stands for Air India. Then ICAO also gives specific names with a letter and a number to each aircraft that is registered by an airline. There are registrations and also type designators. So, for example, VTDDN is one of the aircraft. VT stands for the aircraft, or all aircraft registered in India are given the initial VT, and there is a 3-letter DDN is a 3-letter code for identifying a specific aircraft, and B741 is one of the ways of identifying a model of Boeing 747. 747-100 will be called as B741 under the ICAO standardization. Recently, ICAO has introduced machine readable and biometric passports to improve the throughput at the airports, And as I mentioned, drone regulations and registrations is a new activity of ICAO, which allows us to standardize across the whole world. Let us have a look at industry and trade organizations. The most important and the prominent organization of the aviation industry is the IATA, International Civil Aviation Organization. Why IATA is needed? IATA is needed because we want a body that can act as a clearinghouse for various commercial aspects of aviation, whereas ICAO is more related to the legal and the sovereign aspects of aviation across various countries. IATA is a body of airlines and other operators. So, IATA allows us to have a standardized interface. It allows us to use certain standardized baggage tags which can be similar all over the world. It also arrives at dimensions of the onboard carriage of luggage as well as the check-in baggage. So, all these standardizations have come through the intervention of IATA. IATA has several focus areas. First of all, it does what is called as the IOSA. IOSA stands for IATA Operational Safety Audit of Airlines. This is a very important task of IATA, which ensures that the operational management and control systems of an airline are audited to ensure safety in operation and safety throughout the organization. It also simplifies the air transportation business by bringing in standardized electronic tickets, barcoding of boarding passes and self-service baggages. These are the initiatives of IATA to simplify the air transport business. IATA also aims to help airlines cut down on the environmental impact, the reducing of the environmental impact. So, the average improvement in the fuel efficiency of 1.5% per annum has been achieved from the year 2009 to 2020, primarily because of certain initiatives of IATA. IATA has also come up with a cap on the aviation net carbon emissions from 2020 onwards to ensure there is a carbon neutral growth in aviation. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, 50% reduction in net aviation carbon emissions by 2050 compared to the 2005 levels under the CORSIA 2016 agreement. Then IATA also comes up with a lot of services and publications to help standardize and regulate, not regulate, but help in efficient operations of airlines and airports throughout the world. There are some other industry organizations about whom one should be aware, although we will not look at them in more detail, but I will just try to mention their names, and at leisure you can check the websites of these organizations to understand what they are doing. There is an association of companies that work in fabrication and assembly of aircraft and aircraft components. This is called as the Aerospace Industries Association. This is the mouthpiece of the aerospace industry. There is AOPA, which is the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. Members of AOPA are mostly individuals who own or companies who own their own aircraft. Okay. This is not an organization of airlines. These are aircraft owners and the pilots who fly them. Then you have ALPA, which is the Airline Pilots Association, dedicated to look into the various aspects related to the pilots who operate in airlines. There is an Airport Council International, which looks at all issues related to the airports, and then there is an ATA, or the Air Transport Association, which basically aims at standardizing the various components and subcomponents of the aircraft to ensure that maintenance procedures are streamlined. There are many other organizations, and I would urge you to have a look at them. For example, there is AAAE, which is American Association of Airport Executives. Then you have GAMA, General Aviation Manufacturers Association, dedicated to companies that are focusing only on manufacturing small aircraft for private use, called as a general aviation. Then you have Helicopter Association International, which, as the name suggests, looks at all helicopter related aspects. Then there is Regional Airline Association, or RAA, which is a body where all the regional airlines of the world come together and look at their own issues. Proceeding further, let us look at the organizations from India. So, the primary organization that ensures regulation and compliance in the country is the DGCA, or the Directorate General of Civil Aviation. This has many functions, the primary one of them being the safety, regulation of air transport, promotion of civil aviation, and also providing all kinds of approvals and licenses and permissions for the aircraft and the personnel. Then you have Airports Authority of India, which is a public sector organization primarily for development and maintenance of airports in the country. Although a large number of airports are now being outsourced to various private agencies, but they are all channelized mainly through the Airports Authority of India. The AAI also is responsible in this country for provision of the air traffic services. It has got two basic streams. There is a stream that looks at airport operations, and then there is a stream that looks at the air traffic management. In that, there are some experts who are focusing on the upkeep and installation and maintenance of the various equipment or the navigational equipment, and then there are air traffic managers who actually sit down and control the flights. Then you are requested to have a look at some other organizations in some more detail. There is the Bureau of Civil Aviation Security, or BCAS, which, like the TSA in the USA, it lays down the aviation security standards. It manages the security aspect of all the airports. Then you have AERA, which is an Airports Economic Regulation Authority. This agency ensures that there is no chance of unfair competition or any other financial practices of predatory pricing, etc. You also have the Aircraft Accident Investigation Board, which is analogous to the NTSB, which investigates all the accidents that take place for aircrafts registered in India. Then you have another organization called as the IWPA. This is Indian Women Pilots Association as the earlier name, but now they have changed their name to Indian Women Professionals Association. We in IIT Bombay and the Mumbai branch of the Aeronautical Society of India work very closely with IWPA, and they are a part of almost all our events that we conduct, such as the one that you see on the screen, which was done in 2022. Okay, having looked at the organizations that work in the field of civil aviation, it is now time for us to look at one interesting aspect. Along with the regulations and along with the norms suggested by ICAO, certain freedoms of the air have been granted to various sovereign bodies, and these freedoms of the air allow many interesting activities to take place on the commercial sector. So, whenever there is an operation of an aircraft for commercial purposes, that is through airlines, they are going to operate under these freedoms of the air. So, broadly speaking, you have what is called as transit rights, which cover the first and the second freedom. Then you have traffic rights, which covered under the third and the fourth freedom. You have beyond traffic rights, which is fifth and sixth freedom, and then you have cabotage, which is under the seventh, eighth and ninth freedom. Now, we will look at each of these freedoms one by one to understand what they represent and how they can affect the operations. The first freedom which has been given by ICAO to all its participating bodies is the right or privilege in respect to scheduled international services granted by one state or member of ICAO to another MEB to fly across its territory without landing. So, notice that A, B and C are three different countries, three different sovereign states. Now, an aircraft takes off from A and wants to go to C, and although the airspace above B is the sovereign right of the country B, but in general it has agreed under the first freedom to allow aircraft from country A or state A to go over it to the country C. Now, while transiting over the country, there might be some charges which can be levied by the country B, and these are also decided by ICAO. Okay. But the airspace is sovereign property of each state, but in general there is a freedom given, right. So, for example, under the first freedom, a flight from Canada to Mexico flown by a Mexican airline can fly over the United States. Okay. Now, the airspace of India is the third largest aviation market, and it spans over 6 million square feet of area, right. Now, is the entire airspace available for commercial flights? No. There are certain areas which are restricted, which are prohibited and which are not permitted. Okay. For example, the Rashtrapati Bhavan comes under the prohibited airspace. So, you cannot just fly an aircraft over Rashtrapati Bhavan. Similarly, there are many defense establishments like the Gwalior Air Force Base. You cannot fly an aircraft over that particular Airbus without prior approval. And then there are certain areas which are marked in red color in a triangle in the airspace map, where there is a danger because many testing and other trials take place at that location. There are no-fly zones, as I mentioned. The Taj Mahal is a no-fly zone, the Parliament building, the defense and air force bases, the Tower of Silence in Mumbai, which is a place where the Zoroastrians or Parsis bury their dead people, Rashtrapati Bhavan, as I mentioned. Now, the question is, although under the first freedom, the sovereign airspace of a country belongs to the airspace of a country belongs to the sovereign nation, is it possible for a country to ban the flights? So, there are many examples of this. For example, during 2019, after the Balakot strikes, Pakistan closed its airspace for India in February. So, you will notice that no aircraft is flying, no Indian aircraft is allowed to fly over the Pakistan airspace because they just banned the airspace. Now, this particular activity of Pakistan, they costed many airlines from India a total sum of more than 500 crores, because all the flights had to be now routed in a manner that they do not cover the airspace of Pakistan. This ban was lifted in the month of July, few months after it was imposed, primarily because Pakistan realized that they are losing a lot of financial advantage. They were losing out commercially, because if the aircraft do not fly over your sovereign nation, you do not get the overflight charges. So, because of that and because of the inter-government discussions, the airspace was lifted. The second freedom of air is the right or privilege in respect of a scheduled international air service granted by one state to another state to land in its territory for non-traffic purposes, mostly during emergencies. So, if a flight is taking off from country A to country C, and while they are flying they encounter some emergency and they want to land in country B out of emergency, it is generally presumed that this permission will be given under the second freedom of the air. So, for maintenance, technical reasons or any other reason, a flight from A to C can land at B. So, for example, a flight from UK to the USA flown by a British airline, it can be allowed to refuel at an Irish airport which comes in between. The third freedom of the air is basically, the third freedom of the air allows a country A to put down traffic coming from its country to another country. So, for example, an aircraft can take off from country A and it can allow passengers to deboard in country B. So, a flight from New Zealand to Japan can be flown by a New Zealand airline. This is under the third freedom of the air. Then we come to the fourth freedom of the air. This is the reverse. That means you allow a country B to take passengers and to land at another state and allow them to deboard. So, for example, a flight from Chile to Brazil flown by a Brazilian airline. So, the origin is in Chile, the destination is in Brazil, and the airline is from Brazil. So, from another country you can come to the home country and drop passengers under the fourth freedom. Now, in the fifth freedom, the right is granted by one state to another state to put down and take on in the territory of the first state traffic coming from or destined to a third state. For example, you can take off from A, take passengers from B and drop them at C. So, a flight from Melbourne, Australia to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia with a stop in Denpasar, Indonesia, flown by a Malaysian Airlines. Passengers and cargo may travel between Melbourne and Denpasar with no intention to continue to Kuala Lumpur. Okay, so this is one way of travel, and this is called as a fifth freedom. The sixth freedom of the air is to allow an airline from a country A to pick up the traffic in its home state B and drop it to another state C. So, a flight from A comes to home state, picks up passengers and drops them at C. Here B is the home state. Okay. So, you are coming from a foreign country to your home state and then you are dropping passengers. So, a flight from New Zealand to Colombia flown by an airline based in Chile with a stop in Santiago, Chile would qualify under the sixth freedom of the air. The seventh freedom of the air allows you to transport traffic with no requirement to include any part of the territory of the recipient state. So, you can take off from B and land at C, but you are actually from a country A. An example of this is an Irish airline, the home state Ireland, flies between Spain and Sweden, B and C. Okay, this is the seventh freedom of the air. The eighth freedom is called as consecutive cabotage. Here, an airline from country A can travel to an airport in country B and then act as a domestic air carrier in country B to pick passengers from one city of country B to the other city. So, for example, a flight operated by Indian Airlines between Delhi and San Francisco with a full stop in New York. Passengers and cargo may board or disembark the flight in New York and also fly to San Francisco. So, this airline can take people from New York to San Francisco, although it operates from India. The ninth freedom is a standalone cabotage. Here you do not even have to travel from the home state to the foreign state. You can simply fly from one city to the other city in a foreign country, whereas you are from some other home state. So, Air India, which is based in India, can fly between Paris and Lyon and transport passengers. It is a domestic carrier in France, but it is an airline which is based in India. Hence, it is called as standalone cabotage. Thank you for your attention.